Welcome. This is the third video on using the Metasploit framework. If you hadn't had a chance, first watch the introduction to the Metasploit framework, and then number two. And here quickly, we're going to talk about some of the things we can do with the Metasploit framework that's not necessarily exploitation. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And what I have here is VMware open with Kali Linux 2021.3. and also a Metasploitable virtual machine, which will be my target at 192, 168, 70, 129. Important to have this in non-routable space, localized, just to see how we can use some of the other auxiliary modules in the Metasploit framework. Many of these have legal issues, state, national, international. So it's always good to use these tools in a contained virtual environment, so you can see how these things work safely. I'm going to open up the Kali Linux and start MSF Console, which is the Metasploitable framework. That's going to spin up, make my fancy banner. And we've already learned how to search for different items. So I'm just going to kind of get to it. What we're looking for is different port scanners, and they're kind of in the same format. So I'm going to use auxiliary scanner. There's a lot of scanners in this directory structure. Port scan. And let's just use a basic SYN scan. You can see that my prompt turned to that. And so if I show options, normally when we're doing an exploit, we have that payloads. But a payload isn't applicable here because we're just using a scanner. But we still have some things we probably want to tweak in the variable settings. First of all, this is looking at the first 10,000 ports. So we're going to make this a little shorter, and we're going to set ports to 1 through, let's just go 50. You'll see that it did change the ports variable. We need to set, I don't like one thread, so let's go ahead and have a bunch of threads running. Set that to 50. And the timeout, it's going to wait 500 milliseconds. It's going to wait half a second. That's not necessary. We're in a contained virtual environment on our host machine. So let's set the timeout 50 milliseconds. And then finally, the remote host isn't listed. So let's set that remote host. It is S for plural on this one, even though we have one, to 192, 168, 70, 129. And that, before I hit the enter, is my Metasploitable virtual machine. So that's what we're going to hit it at. Let's set that. Again, I want to show options, verify that what I think is true is, okay, we're going to scan ports 1 through 50. That is the address of my Metasploitable virtual machine. Change it to 50 threads and a timeout of 50 milliseconds. So I can go ahead and run that, and you can see that it didn't work. Oh no, that's because if you run nmap in your Kali, that won't let you run it either because of the permissions were in here as Kali. So I backed all the way out, and I'm going to run sudo MSF Console. This is going to allow me the permissions to do the same thing. Just like on nmap, it has to know that you have the permissions. So at speed, right, we use auxiliary scanner. And again, that was a port scanner. And SYN scan, right? We set threads to 50. We set ports to 1 through 50. Oh, I just set it to 20. Let's do 50. We set our hosts to 192, 168. What do we got here? 70, 129. We're going to show the options. And the only thing I didn't change was the timeout to 50. I always like to show the options one more time, run through it, have what I thought. And this time you'll see that this does run fine and give me the SYN scan that I expected. Now that we have that, let's go ahead and we'll go back and let's look at a version scanner, and let's see if we can figure out what version, and we'll go after the port 22, assuming that's SSH. We'll go ahead and do a version scan on that to see exactly if that is SSH and what version that it's running. So let's try that, clear the screen. Let's go to use, again, we're auxiliary scanners. This time we're looking at a particular service. And that's a general format, SSH version. We're going to show the options. Remote port 22 makes sense. So we'll set our host again, 192.168.70.129, my Metasploitable virtual machine. Final show options a second time. That looks pretty good. The one thread won't matter. And it picked a good timeout this time for 30 milliseconds. Go ahead and run it. And I do have some results, and I have the version of SSH running. So I've kind of used this for active reconnaissance, where I scanned the machine, found an open port, went to verify what service it is. Now I could even search the modules in Metasploit to see if there is an exploit that already matches this version. So that's a couple examples of a couple of different modules you can do with the Metasploit framework. Thank you.